Well, as I said, I'm Katie Schuler, and I know a lot of y'all, but I'm from First Pres a while ago. I think through high school and college, I went to Clemson, but then came back and was at First Pres a bit. But I'm now at Grace Pres when I'm in America. Otherwise, I'm in Japan. So I'm really grateful for the invitation to come and share a bit about my call to Japan. Why Japan? And y'all probably have varying understandings or connotations of that. And I wish we had a lot longer time so I could kind of hear each of your stories and your connection to missions and maybe why you're in this class and what your hearts are for different parts of the world. That's a really valuable thing. But I'm going to have to try to keep myself on time point so that we're not late to big church anyhow, right? But I do maybe at least want to get your name. Maybe we can just go around quickly and do that because I don't know each of you. And just bury or flush, all right, very briefly. If you had a pet fish die, and maybe you have before had that experience, do you flush it or bury it? You can throw in an alternative if you like, and I'll explain afterwards why I'm asking, right? So, yeah, if y'all don't mind.
Died, and we put it in a little box and froze it.
Oh, God.
And then what?
Well, we left it there until the grandkids came when they could see the end of our betta fish.
And then?
We tossed it over the hill.
Okay, all right, okay. Disposal, all right, okay, yeah, all right. Mr.
Robert Belding.
Ate the fish.
Okay, all right. Mm-hmm.
I would, Ann Belding, and I would probably flush it.
Mm-hmm.
Helen Lafitte, flush.
Mm-hmm.
Pam Anderson, and it depends on the size of the fish.
Okay, yeah, right? Sounds good. Yeah, okay.
John Anderson concur with my wife.
Depends on the size of the fish, all right, okay.
And I'm Tiffany Anderson, and we actually had a betta fish, and my grandmother unceremoniously flushed it when I was about 6. So
Okay.
go with that.
As a 6-year-old, you're tough into the world. Yeah, dead things get flushed.
Well, it bit her finger. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, goodness gracious, all right.
Kelly Smith. I had a fish in college and it died, and we kind of forgot about it, and I'm not sure what happened to it.
Okay, yeah, so low emotional attachment, disposal doesn't even matter.
Joyce Go. I think I would flush it.
Mm-hmm, okay, yeah, all right.
Bonnie Whitecross, I think we've been known to flush.
Flushers, mm-hmm.
Alan Whitecross, concur.
Robert Seeley, I'd probably feed it to the cat.
Okay. Same category with Dr. Belding. It becomes useful, right? Yeah.
Paula Hill, I'd probably flush it. Molly Bain, and I would probably flush it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
I'm Laura Swayman. I've actually buried 2 little pet fish.
Oh.
Yvette was just saying, so has she. Yvette Shaper, we've buried one.
Okay, all right. A burying family, yes. Mm-hmm.
Doris Stevens, I would bury.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. 3 burials. Yeah. Okay, and these are friends of mine, so I'll put you on the spot too. Just your name and if your pet fish died.
Miriam and David Ashworth,
Mm-hmm.
we would definitely have to flush. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, flushers. All right. Okay, so we've got maybe a majority flushers, a couple burials, and a couple use it as a food source. That was one of those things that I never thought was sort of cultural at all until teaching at my school in Japan. We had one of our school fish die, and then at the teachers' meeting after school, the discussion amongst the American teachers was, well, when are we going to flush it? And the Japanese teachers were horrified. They were like, you flush your fish, and they were thinking, of course, we're going to have a burial service, and burial it and thank it for its life and put it in the ground, And so, yeah, and then that was interesting to me too, because in general, people are cremated, but apparently you burn your people, but you bury your fish in Japan. Yeah, so.
Students to all be involved?
Only a couple of the students were the ones that felt closest to it. Right, yeah. So I don't oh man, too much Nemo. So the other way for fish to go out, right, is as a beautiful sacrifice for the human palate. As delicious as this is to me now, and I eat sushi probably once a week at least in Japan, that is not at all what I thought when I was growing up would be my regular diet. So I'm definitely from Columbia, never saw living really outside of South Carolina, and never knew much about Asia or anything growing up. And it's a slow, piecemeal work of God, I guess, that he has brought me there. This is probably small text, and so you don't necessarily need to be able to read it all, because I'll kind of go through that. But I think maybe the first part of God bringing me on this calling would be First Pres, because in the summer there were mission trips for the high school students. And so we did inner city missions, and we also went to Wales at the time. And so for 2 summers in a row, I went to Wales on 2-week trips. And so that was, I think, still not anything that made me feel like, oh, maybe missions is what the Lord has for me, but it did make me realize to be Christian is to be involved with missions. And this, kind of automatic, well, of course we're all going to spend the summer in mission trips, and most everybody went, which is probably the reason that I did, honestly, because everybody else in the youth group was going. And so that was kind of the first layer. After that, I was in college. And after my junior year, or during my junior year, a friend of mine had been to China for a summer mission trip the year before. And we were both English education majors. She said, there's this great opportunity where you teach English to middle school Chinese students in small towns where they can't afford foreign teachers, so you have a camp for free. I really enjoyed it. They told us to either come back next year or replace ourselves. So you're my replacement. Pray about it, And I was an English education major. I really didn't know anything about China except the Great Wall, and that it was very far away. But this girl, Natalie, was very cool in my eyes, and she was friends with all the older, cooler guys. So I thought, yeah, I definitely want to do what she says, because this is going to be socially beneficial. And with that great spiritual motivation, I explored the possibility of going to China, but that definitely was a foundational trip for me, where it was different from Wales in that you're just in an entirely incomprehensible environment, right? In Wales, you're still hearing a lot of English. You still have some sort of comprehension for the way things work. But in China, I was going over with probably a fusion of Korea and Japan and China in my mind, and kind of expected things to be neat and orderly, and that people would bow, and that people would be wearing robes, and that there would be everything available because everything's made in China, right? But then I get there and there's like chickens walking around and people like everywhere, like spitting, and it's noisy and smelly, and it's like germs have never been discovered. And it was like a rude but also wonderful awakening, I guess, at that point, because as kind of tough as living conditions were to a spoiled American like myself who was used to temperature-controlled environments, it was also a lot bigger realization of who God must be. It was one thing to realize that God was relevant to these Welsh people who didn't seem to want him, and that they're in this depressed coal mining village. It was easy for me to see, you used to have God, you just got away from him. Of course, this is the right thing for you. But in this context where these people don't sound like me or look like me or smell like me, and they couldn't read the Bible if I handed it to them, is God just as relevant to them as he is to me because I grew up in a Judeo-Western culture? Absolutely. And so any more understanding that I have of him is God's grace, and I'm no less part of God's plan, right? Or no more. So China was a really eye-opening time in God's grace. And so after graduating, I taught high school English for a couple years in Columbia, and got to a point where it was, if I do a third year in a row, I'm going to burn out. It was great, but exhausting and really emotionally and mentally challenging, and wanted to be able to keep teaching. It felt like year 3 is going to be the end. It's going to be the death of me. So I prayed about where else the Lord would have me. And so that was China. Right? And so I went back for a couple of years there. And while there, got to talk with a lot of long-term missionaries, right? So the people that have had decided Yep, just gonna step over here to hold the coffee. There we go. I have a tether. The people that had said, this is where I'm gonna spend my life, and they'd learned the language, they'd learned the culture, all right? And the Elliots popped in here earlier that are elsewhere in the building. They were one of the couples that I went and stayed with. And that was eye-opening to me too, because it took the idea of missions from a trip where you're making your wonderful American life and then kind of, temporarily jumping somewhere else, which is, what I thought maybe the Lord would have me do. But then seeing these people, and I would assume that they were long-term missionaries in my heart, maybe because they were a little bit socially off and didn't fit in America, was honestly my main thought of long-term missionaries before. And that they were probably suffering and not enjoying their life as much as they would in America. And that was not true at all. These are the most joyful people who understood God so richly and deeply. And yeah, I was just so humbled because I was like, man, I kind of want what y'all have. You live here in China and there's a lot of sacrifices, but you have a lot that I didn't know I didn't have. Right? But then the where question was still a question, I guess. China is very ripe for the gospel. Have you all been to China on short-term or long-term trips or anything? It's a place where people are hungry, and so especially the younger generation. If you share the gospel with 10 people, probably one of them will want to know more and will eventually become a Christian. They're just, a couple generations out from a communist, closed environment, and they know that things have been kept from them, and this, gospel of make money is not satisfying. And so they want to know, and they're hungry. At the same time, culturally, living in China was very frustrating for me. I tend to like things very orderly and clean and neat and good smelling. And so in that way, I loved the individual people, but almost everything in the culture felt chaotic and difficult for me to deal with. And so, I prayed, God, I'm totally open to being here forever. Please rewire me a little bit if this is what you have. But at that point, felt like, okay, a break in America. I'll go back to the States for 5 to 10 years, figure out where a place is for long term, and raise the support base, get a master's in education, and look at the next steps. And was back into teaching public school at the point when, after 3 years, once again, there were a few too many straws that broke the camel's back, and I'd gotten to know Miriam Jerome. I don't know if y'all knew her before she moved to Colorado, but when I first came back from China, I asked her to mentor me, help me readjust through reverse culture shock, coming back from China to America. And she'd been in Japan for about 15 years previously. And so she was helping me adjust, back to life in America and all the, reverse culture shock issues that come along with that. And, she's hearing me say the things that were stressful about China to me. She said, well, if, being really dirty and messy and disorganized is stressful to you, you could consider Japan because it's the neatest, most organized, most hyper-efficient and clean country in the world, And so I did. Yeah, and went in summer of 2014 to Okinawa, where one of her sons was directing at a school where her husband had been directing for a while at that time. So I taught summer school English there. And even though Okinawa is kind of Japan, but kind of not, it was enough of a taste, and I got to spend a couple days in Tokyo afterwards. And so really felt like, it's different. The people are not spiritually hungry. And so that's really a disheartening factor. But there's such a natural affinity for me for the culture that I just can't help but love them. And so then therefore all the closeness that they have, it doesn't make me want to go back home. It just breaks my heart. It makes me want to stay. So for me, I guess, Doug had asked me to kind of spend a bit of time on calling. And so I think that's how God kind of slowly worked that. Do y'all have any questions right now?
if I can tell you a short story and then ask a question on the spot. My son said that the Presbyterians in the U.S. early 20th century took their top seminary graduates from the mission field and sent them to Japan. The second tier type, not quite as good as those, they sent them to Korea. And if you look at the number of Presbyterians in Korea today as compared to Japan, what would you think about the missionaries? I want to know what tier you're in.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, I'm going to have to say 4 or 5. I'm definitely in the in-training category. But yeah. I mean, but that's a good point. We've seen a huge contrast, right, in the gospel in Korea and in Japan. Particularly with the Presbyterian world.
Is that cultural?
That
Korea was more of a field of fruit.
I'm honestly not totally sure all the reasons why. I know that part of it was a more culturally appropriate translation of some of the spiritual words is one of the things I've heard, but also just a cultural humility that has not yet happened in Japan.
It's also called the sovereignty of God.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
What were the reverse cultural changes you had to go through?
To come back from China, I think the hardest things were being judgmental in my heart towards the Christians in America and a lot of aspects of American culture. And I mean, that was wrong, and then I had to work through that.
Going back to the Korea-Japan difference, I don't have the details, but at some point in Japan, there were a lot of Japanese coming to Christ, but then the government came down really hard on them, so a lot of Christians were killed. And so that kind of made people back off from converting to Christianity, and that may be a contributing factor.
Usually grows under persecution.
Right.
I think Iran may be growing faster than other places.
What would be the time frame of the persecution?
I don't remember.
Right. So the 1600s, right? So the gospel first came in mid-1500s through Jesuits from Portugal to Japan. Francis Xavier was actually also the first missionary to India, and he ended up being the first one to Japan as well. And so the gospel was taking root. Nagasaki was the biggest front for Christian growth, but then about 1615, 1620, the powers that be in Japan decided that they were suspicious of foreign things, and that the foreigners were eventually just going to try to abuse their own system economically. And so they violently just killed all the Christians.
Was that portrayed any in Silence?
Yes, that's exactly. If you've read or seen
The anguish of all of that
Yes.
kind of
Yes. Yeah. So, in brief, so Silence started as a novel. It's historical fiction, but in it, the Japanese author portrays some of this persecution. He himself is a jaded Catholic, and so it's unclear the author's own feelings, but my feeling after watching the movie was that his take was, it's so sad that this happened, but the Japanese were wrong for killing Christians mercilessly, but the Portuguese were wrong for trying to import their culture. So this was so unfortunate, wasn't it? Is kind of the overall tone. And that's so disheartening. Because it's beyond the, normally we hear with persecution that fires the church on and inspires them. But you see with Silence and the Japanese psychology, they realized that the more they killed the Christians, the more the church was growing. So they then would take the priests and make them recant and systematically kill off Christians of their own church in front of them until they would deny the gospel. And so they were really changing the psychology of it so that it's not, oh, you died for your faith. Wow, this must be a good faith, because that's what happens. But this priest recanted, guys. Y'all need to give up your faith. Well, yeah, he recanted because you tortured all of his believers. And so it's a sick and twisted theory, but it just, the one plus of seeing the movie and studying that time period a little bit is that a lot of Japanese have this answer that Christianity is a Western religion and it doesn't mix with being Japanese. And I think, in that time period of history, we see it's not that they don't mix. They say it wasn't a good soil for absorbing Christianity. It's not that it was not a good soil. Like, that's bullcrap. You violently killed everyone who believed it. It was taking root. And killing everybody who believes it is not the same thing as saying it doesn't mix, But then there's a history of it being shameful now, and you're going against the flow.
First century Thomas went to India, but did anybody go to China or that area during the first, second century?
Not that I know of. The first on record that we know of for China is also the 1500s. Right.
This is kind of anecdotal, but I was studying German in a class with a lot of people from all different countries, and a Japanese girl was there. And so she was learning German in English. So she asked me, we were friends, and she asked me if I would read a paper she had to write for a different class. And it was actually eye-opening. It was about Christianity and the Reformation. And I think she was sincerely asking questions. Why is Christianity a force that is either fighting against people? I'm not sure,
Yeah.
She said, or fighting with each other. And then if you think about what we did in World War II, which I completely am not making any statement if that was right or wrong, but a Christian Western nation destroyed 2 of their cities. I just wonder, that's completely anecdotal, but I just wonder if, like, young people, and she was in her 20s, they kind of view Christianity in this, I would say it's a false way, obviously, but do they just kind of have a lot of things confirming that that's an accurate?
Yes, I think so. Yes. It's seen as, it's not the best route to peace in the mind of, especially from a Buddhist culture, right? Buddhism is peace, but Christianity leads to wars and conflict and abuse and colonialism, imperialism in general. Right? Yeah, and it's just, also no, overall comment on necessity, but it's really unfortunate that Nagasaki, right, was the biggest Christian stronghold in Japan, and in one day we did what took, a century of trying to obliterate Christians. So there's a lot of humility that goes with being a missionary, and the greatest number of missionaries right now in Japan are from America and South Korea, which is, if you know anything about the Korea-Japan relations, that's just, it's volumes for the gospel and the power of the gospel. But, all right, well, I kind of only want to spend maybe 10 more minutes, so you'll have a couple minutes to browse some, I brought literally some of my mail from Japan and some other things and newsletters and whatnot, and I can kind of talk to y'all. So I'll go a little bit more quickly through, but this is where I've been for the past 2 years and where I will be for at least 2 years when I go back, Chiba, Japan, which is about an hour and a half east of Tokyo. Right. And so, I think God creates different drives in people for different places, different people groups, and he calls a lot of people to be exactly where they are in their home country, and that is huge and important. Certainly not everybody in America knows the gospel, right? And if we all left, that would be a problem, right? So there's just a difference of calling, right? I don't think that everybody who's a Christian needs to go to Japan or anywhere else, right? But for me, the way that this hits me is heartbreaking that is a call. So of the countries that are open to missionaries, I have a religious activities visa, right, which is crazy because that is not possible in India or China, right, a lot of other countries in the world. This is the largest unevangelized nation that's open, right? It's almost like they're saying, hadn't worked for 500 years, come on in, see what you can do, And so you may hear a lot, this 0.5% number. So that's if we look at evangelical Christians. There are more Catholics. And so a lot of that harkens back to the original churches from the 15 and 1600s. Buddhist numbers for Japan, it varies a lot with which source you use, because most Japanese people today are sort of nominally Buddhist in the way that a lot of Americans, if you ask them to check their religious box, might check Christianity. But then if you said, do you ever pray, read your Bible, go to church or fellowship with other Christians? No, right? So similarly, a lot of them identify as Buddhist if you ask them to choose a religion, because many cultural pieces of Japan living are Buddhist, but they don't necessarily have a deep belief in that. That makes sense.
What's your definition of unevangelized?
Right. So the Joshua Project defines 2% as it's been fully evangelized, or sufficiently. 2%? Right, as it's, or maybe that's when it's under-evangelized, right? But then it's at least out of the unevangelized.
The church has a presence, at least at that point.
Right. Enough of a presence that the believers there, with help, could evangelize the rest of the country. But with 0.5%, it's very unlikely that the national believers have enough resources to evangelize their own country without outside help.
How many people does 0.5% represent?
The total population is about 127 million. So, math.
Perfect.
Yeah. He's got it. He already knows. He'll tell you later. So I guess the one piece of Japanese culture that I definitely want to hit on, because we don't have a ton of time, that struck me as one of the greatest barriers to the gospel and one of the most just really silent but sinister aspects of the culture is the work culture. Since World War II, right? They've had the mentality that we've got to hit economic recovery and we've got to hit it hard. So for the good of the country, give everything you have to your job. And that's still the case. That's still the mentality. Companies in Japan hire for life, so you're probably not going to get fired. If you're terrible, they're going to give you training. They're going to move you around to a different role in your company. But because they're not going to fire you, you owe them everything. You know, they are your family. And so Japanese people, they work a good bit. The overtime culture is insane. The first 20 to 40 hours of overtime, depending on the company, are a gratuitous favor to your company. So if you take the average of that, then say 30 hours, you can't even clock overtime until you hit 70 hours. And even so, about 22% of Japanese regularly work overtime. So that's more than 1 in 5 that are regularly working at least over 70 hours a week, depending on how large your company is. If it's a smaller company, you might be fine skating by with 60 hours a week. If it's an intense, big, Tokyo or Osaka company, you're working 90 hours a week, definitely. And so it's led to, a lot of damaging things. I mean, like, what would y'all guess suffers because of a work culture like that? Family. Yeah, family. Yeah, family and mental health. And we Christians are also looking at that and saying, there's no time for reflection. There's no time for spiritual health in that. How do you even know what you don't have when what you don't have is sleep? And that physical need kind of overrides a lot of other things that you feel when you're still and quiet. So you have a lot of children who are growing up that are functionally single-parent households. There is a dad, and he's providing all the money. But the kids only see him a little bit on Sundays and when he retires. And, the mentality is, well, if you get in at 22 and you're working 90, 100 hours a week, by the time you're 40, you can have a managerial position, pull it back to 60 hours a week, retire at 65. They have the longest life expectancy on earth, and you have 20 years of golf. Woo! Right? Which is great, except that your kids are grown up. Your wife doesn't know you. There are a lot of people who retire and then have mental health problems because they're home all day and it doesn't feel like home. The office is home. They're a stranger there and they don't even know where anything is in the cupboards. So it's very problematic. High suicide rate, high undiagnosed mental issues as well. So I included that picture as well because it also just shows the conformity of the culture. A lot of it's not the same as workaholism in America sometimes, which is this I need the money. I really need to put in these overtime hours for the time and a half to get money. It's not about the money primarily. It's about the good of the group. And if your work unit, your group is still there, you better be there. You don't want to be the guy that dumped on your group. You don't want to be the guy that that put your own needs ahead of the company. You can't say my family needs me. This company is more important than that. And so it's culturally, it's not really as though they don't feel like they have the option to just go home in the way that Americans might, if that makes sense. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so even as of 2017, 70% of women quit work when they have children. And so therefore, a lot of women don't want to have children now because it feels like choosing. And of those 30%, a lot go to part-time work, and so they're not in the office the same way that they were before they had kids. Yeah, so I put a couple slides in here that were just some things that I'd kind of pulled out of Japanese people who are normally incredibly polite and considerate, and they genuinely want everybody else to be comfortable, and they're very kind people, but they'll be more honest with a foreigner than they would be with another Japanese person, so you can ask them awkward questions, I've asked Japanese people, do you think your parents love each other? How do you know? And no Japanese person would ever ask them that, or do you think your husband works too much? Or, or do you think, and anyway, so in terms of missionaries, I've heard a range of different things, but one of the big sentiments is there's a bit of resentment towards pastors, even Japanese pastors and missionaries, because they're not in this intense work environment where they can only focus on work. And once you kind of become a Christian or you're around that environment, they're telling you, the pastors are, you need to join this Bible study, you need to be in a small group, you need to read your Bible every day. It seems like a lot of time asks, and they just feel like, okay, I'm only mentally awake on the train for 30 minutes on the way to work. I sleep on the train on the way home. That's the only time I have for anything. Do you want that to become my Bible time? Yes, we do. And we want you to, so the Bible studies that I know of for Japanese working men happen at 6 and 6:30 in the morning when they're not getting home till midnight. And so it takes a lot more. But on the other hand, a lot of Japanese Christians have also indicated that there's a need for both. Right, Japanese Christians and missionaries. It's a lot easier for a foreigner, for a missionary to share the gospel, to present ideas, to have gospel conversations. We can ask questions that are viewed as awkward if a Japanese person asks it. And we can also, so we can kind of probe more, but they're also naturally more curious about foreigners. There's a lot of things that I can say are my home culture, because they are my subculture. We say the blessing before meals. We go to church, and that's my culture. There's also a lot of Christianity that I can explain in that conversation. And so there are a lot of openings for us, right, which is often the case with being overseas. But there's also this sense of needing a Japanese Christian to walk with them once they've become a Christian, because they have a hard time reconciling being Japanese and being a Christian, right? Because if your whole life, your goal is to support the group and conform and go along with the group, then becoming a Christian it's betrayal. And so you have to have some way to see that the most loving thing you can do for your parents is share the gospel with them, even if they're going to throw you out of the house, instead of pretend like you're not a Christian so that there's harmony.
Did you give background on that blonde or red hair?
No, she was just, that was exactly what she said to me. And I mean, they're more eye-catching, right? And it's more of a curiosity. Okay.
But they're all black here, basically.
Yes, yeah.
But that's against what you said about they want your religion, but not your culture. Don't bring any of the Western culture to them.
Yeah, but they're very curious about, they all want to improve their English. It's very cool to have an American friend. Yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we see America is functionally, it's like the capital of cool in Japan, which is really weird. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, so specifics of what I'll be doing is taking the first 2 years to learn language full time. I've been working full time at a school, but language is not something that just absorbs like a sponge in my brain to some degree, yes, but I've learned that basically 30 minutes a day is not going to add up to fluency. It's just not. And so, yeah, language school next, and then I do want to continue working with Christian International Schools, which is the niche that I've been in there. We have 50 students at our school, CCSI, which is Covenant Christian Community School International, or Covenant Community School International, and those students are Americans, Koreans, Australians, Filipino, and Japanese. All right, so we're all together. Yeah, and we don't have a ton of time for me to get into that, but just enjoy the cuteness a little bit. It's a school that's first to 12th grade. So I had 10 high schoolers and 12 middle schoolers, which was an English teacher's dream because I read every rough draft, final draft, revision, and again revision for every student every time. It was amazing. Loved it. Yeah. And yeah, kind of the whole group with teachers and whatnot. Yeah. And we also have ministry of English classes to adults because almost everybody in Japan wants to learn English or improve their English.
Is that mostly parents of the school?
No, so these are non-believers from the community. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then this is the what it takes, right? So, I don't know currently what the Lord's calling you to do with what you have, but I would appreciate it if you pray and consider whether, giving towards missions in Japan is something He would have you do. As we pointed out, cost of living in Japan it's a little higher than the U.S., so it's not going to a country that's cheaper, but at the same time, who can afford to then evangelize Japan? Basically South Korea and America. Right. All right. Okay. And I'll just kind of maybe leave it right there. No.
I think a lot of people here probably don't know what Surge is.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm going with the organization Surge, and I'll be a World Witness cooperative because Surge is non-denominational. It's reformed but non-denominational. If you've ever read anything or heard any of Jack Miller's speaking, who was at Westminster in Philadelphia, he's the original founder. He's since passed away, but his wife, Rosemary Miller, who's 93, is still a missionary in London. Yes, yeah, so there is no retirement, folks. But so it's Reformed non-denominational and in over 50 countries, right?
So how did they merge Mission to the World and World Witness in your...
Yeah, so it's a partnership where they're just kind of different focuses. MTW's focus is primarily church planting, and Surge's focus is helping church planting, but also getting into businesses, education, other aspects of society. All right, well, yeah, so we have, I guess, maybe 5 minutes if it goes. Mm-hmm.
You talked about the culture of putting the group first.
Yes.
So what would happen if a Japanese person had the courage to go against that, to say, you know what, I'm leaving work because I've got Bible study. What would happen to that person?
Yeah, mostly ostracism. Yeah. And that's a good point, because that does sometimes happen, even on a child level at schools. If you say that, if you do something to go against the group, then the group just cuts you out. I was very surprised to learn that in this culture where everyone is very kind and gentle and considerate, bullying is also a huge problem, right, with kids and adults. If you don't fit the group, then they're just going to bully you, and you can't come back in. So take your toys somewhere else. Yeah.
In your group of students in school,
Mhm.
do you have any Christians or?
So our school is a Christian international school. So at least one parent is a professing Christian for their kids to come. So it's a really unique environment.
Of each student.
At least.
And what percent Japanese?
We're probably, of our school, we're probably about 40% Japanese.
I wanted to get your insight into this. I worked with, I had interaction with Japanese housewives in Malaysia.
Wow.
My husbands were posted there with a large oil company.
Samsung.
And so that was free
okay.
time. So
Yeah.
I had some training at ESL.
Uh-huh.
So I would come in and do ESL with them. But it felt like they liked the lesson, having that lesson. But whenever I told them, y'all need to get together and practice English, let's get together, go together, practice English, they go, oh, no. So it felt to me like they just wanted the lesson, but weren't really interested in becoming better or more proficient in English. So what's your...
Yeah, my take on that.
Or
Yeah.
what did you experience with the, because you have...
The adults, right.
Yeah.
I think part of it is culturally they have a huge reverence for the leader and the person who is certified to do XYZ. So, if I step out and say, okay, teach each other, blah, 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 none of them are certified English teachers. They can't, all of a sudden they can't, even if one of them knows something much better than I do. So it's this title's very important and being the leader, and they're very leader-driven, which then is a problem for the church when we try to encourage them to have small groups and shared Bible studies. If they haven't been to seminary, they don't want to lead a Bible study,
Is there stigma against fellowship?
It's not incredibly, in the culture, fellowship is hanging out with your coworkers, getting drinks after work. You fellowship with your coworkers, and that's about it. Yeah.
Like there was that one quote about it's easier to, as a foreigner, it's easier to have people to your house than if you're Japanese.
Yes.
Everybody's so private.
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
your life is so private.
Right. They don't go to each other's houses, really. Yeah. All right. Well, I could talk forever, but maybe, yeah. So, Doris, we'll take you last.
Your support do you have?
That's a good question. I'm at 46% right now. So, praise the Lord.
February of this year?
Okay, yep. So I need to change that. That's true. Right. That was the original game plan because April is the school year starting in Japan. And so to enter language school, my entrance points are April or October. But so at this point, I'm going to start language school in October, Lord willing, for the other 54%, but probably go over sooner than that and help with the school full time until then.
And they'll take you back anytime during the school year?
They will, because I also, for the last year, I was teaching and also the English track administrator, so I can at least do administration work, again, without needing to interrupt a school year class. Yeah. All right. Okay, I don't want to hold us up, so, please ask me other questions individually. Thank you all so much for asking and for participating. And I've got a sign up if you would like my prayer update emails. I've got packets if you would like more information with shiny pictures and color printing from Staples, and the mail and prayer cards. So, yeah. And little tiny chocolates.